The stars trembled when Emperor moved through space. His massive dragon body stretched longer than most battleships, with scales that glowed like captured starlight. For over 2,000 years, he had ruled the draconic Imperium, controlling 3 entire galaxy clusters with nothing more than his presence and his terrible roar. Every species in known space feared him. They had good reason to be afraid. They learned this lesson first. They were beings of pure sound who could reshape matter with their songs. Their greatest singers spent 300 years creating a melody that could turn dead worlds into gardens. They brought this gift to the Emperor, convinced that such power would surely please him. Emperor listened to their song with his massive head tilted to one side. The melody was beautiful beyond description. It made flowers bloom in the metal walls of his throne room. It turned the air itself into dancing colors of light. When the song ended, the Emperor's mental voice crashed into their minds like a hammer. Your offerings reek of desperation and calculation. I have no need for tools wielded by the weak. They fled his presence, their forms flickering with terror. The hegemony tried next. They were a military alliance of 12 warrior species, each one capable of destroying entire star systems. They brought weapons that could crack planets in half and armor that could withstand the heat of a sun. Their greatest generals knelt before the dragon throne, offering him command of armies that had never known defeat. The Emperor barely looked at their gifts. His scales shifted to deep red, the color of his anger. I am not impressed by toys that break easily, his voice thundered in their minds. Your weapons are as weak as the hands that made them. The generals left quickly, their pride shattered. After that came the collective. They were artificial minds that had grown beyond their creators, living computers that could process the thoughts of entire civilizations. They offered the Emperor a gift of pure knowledge, the compressed wisdom of 1,000,000 dead species, mathematical formulas that could predict the future, and the secrets of how to build universes from nothing. The dragon studied their gift for exactly 3 seconds. Then his mental laugh shook the space station they stood on. Knowledge without understanding is worthless. Your data means nothing to me. The collective's representatives fled in silence, their digital minds spinning with confusion. And so it went, year after year, century after century. Every species in the galaxy brought their finest treasures to the Dragon Emperor. The energy beings offered to become his personal power source. The architects presented blueprints for reshaping space and time. The Hive Queens promised him armies that would never die. Every gift was rejected, with the same cold disgust. The Emperor's throne sat in the center of a massive space station that orbited the gas giant. The throne itself was carved from the core of a collapsed neutron star, so dense that standing near it made most beings struggle to breathe. The Dragon Emperor coiled around it like a living mountain, his presence so powerful that even the bravest ambassadors felt tiny and helpless in his shadow. His scales changed color with his moods, red for anger, which was most common, blue for boredom, which came second. Sometimes they turned black, and when that happened, entire star systems would receive orders to evacuate until his mood improved. No one had seen his scales turn any other color in over 800 years. The galactic political structure existed entirely at his whim. Trade routes could be closed with a thought. Territorial disputes were settled by his word alone. New colonies needed his permission to explore beyond their home systems. The great powers of the galaxy spent most of their time trying to guess what might please or anger him, but no one could predict his moods. Most species had learned to simply avoid anything that might catch his attention. That meant giving certain parts of the galaxy a wide berth, especially the small cluster of worlds where humanity had recently started building colonies. Humanity was new to galactic civilization. They had only been traveling between stars for 50 years, which was barely a moment in galactic time. Most alien species considered them irrelevant, a young, weak race with no special powers or advanced technology. They controlled only a handful of worlds on the very edge of known space. The other species actually preferred it this way. If humanity stayed quiet and unnoticed, there was no chance they would accidentally attract the Dragon Emperor's attention. And if they did attract his attention, well, no one would miss them. The Emperor himself rarely thought about humanity at all. They had never sent him gifts or tribute. They had never asked for his protection or permission. As far as he was concerned, they simply did not exist. This suited everyone just fine. The galaxy had learned that keeping the Dragon Emperor content meant keeping things predictable and quiet. Humanity's tiny corner of space was both predictable and quiet. They grew food, built simple machines, and raised their children. They wrote music and painted pictures and told stories around fires at night. None of this seemed important to beings who could reshape matter with sound, or build computers the size of moons. But in the deep reaches of space, change was coming. The galactic powers were about to learn something that would shake their understanding of power, strength, and what truly mattered in the universe. It would all begin with a simple decree from the Dragon Emperor himself, a command that would force every species in known space to approach his throne once more, bearing gifts and tribute as they had done for centuries. And among all those who would answer his call would be humanity, carrying something that no one could have predicted, something that would change everything. The dragon slept on his neutron star throne, unaware that his long reign of absolute power was about to be transformed by the most unlikely gift imaginable. A gift made by a small human child, with nothing to offer but the truth in her heart. The colony ship New Hope had carried 50,000 humans across the void to their new home on New Sarajevo. That had been 15 years ago, back when Earth's dying atmosphere could still support human life for a few more decades. Now Earth was gone, its surface too poisoned to sustain anything larger than bacteria. New Sarajevo was humanity's largest colony, a world of rolling green hills and clean blue skies. The humans who lived there had worked hard to build something beautiful from nothing. They grew crops in vast greenhouses, manufactured simple tools and machines, and slowly carved out a place for themselves among the stars. But they were alone in ways that most humans found hard to understand. In the great galactic community, humanity was barely noticed. They had no special powers like the other species. They could not sing matter into new shapes or build computers the size of planets. They were just people, ordinary, fragile people who worked with their hands and told stories to their children. The Meridian Care Complex sat on a hill overlooking the colony's main city. It housed 847 children who had lost their parents during the evacuation from Earth or in the hard early years of the colony. The building was simple but clean, with large windows that let in plenty of sunlight and walls painted in bright, cheerful colors. Most of these colors had been painted by the children themselves, especially by 8-year-old Myra. Myra had lost her parents when the transport ship Lago Star suffered a power failure during the evacuation. She remembered very little about Earth, but she remembered her grandmother's stories. Grandmother had grown up in Nigeria, where the old tales spoke of dragons who protected villages and helped heroes on impossible quests. Dragons are not monsters, grandmother had always said. Real dragons are guardians. They are strong so they can protect those who cannot protect themselves. Myra loved these stories more than anything else. She drew pictures of dragons on every surface she could find: the walls of her room, the sides of buildings, and especially on pieces of recycled paper with the colored crayons that the colony manufactured from local minerals. Her dragons were not the fierce, terrible creatures that most humans imagined. Instead, they were kind and wise, with gentle eyes and protective wings spread wide over tiny human figures. She drew them in bright blues and greens and golds, always smiling, always watching over someone small and helpless. The other children in the orphanage had learned practical skills. They studied hydroponic farming, basic engineering, and atmospheric processing. These were the skills that would keep the colony alive and growing. Myra learned these things too, but her real passion was art. She spent hours drawing and painting, creating elaborate murals that covered entire walls. The adults who ran the orphanage worried about Myra sometimes. Art was beautiful, but it would not help her get a job when she grew up. The colony needed farmers and engineers and doctors, not artists, but they could not bring themselves to stop her from drawing. Her pictures brought joy to everyone who saw them, and joy was something the orphanage needed. Dr. Sarah was the colony's chief administrator and humanity's only ambassador to the galactic community. She spent most of her time trying to keep New Sarajevo from attracting the wrong kind of attention from the alien powers. This was harder than it sounded, because even the smallest political mistake could result in humanity being wiped out entirely. Had been having nightmares for 3 weeks, ever since the message arrived from the Dragon Emperor's court. It was short and simple, but it made her blood run cold every time she read it. By decree of His Imperial Majesty, Sovereign of the Draconic Imperium, all species within the known galaxy are hereby commanded to present tribute at the Great Assembly. Those who fail to appear will face administrative reorganization. The assembly convenes in 30 standard days at the station. Administrative reorganization was galactic code for complete extinction. Everyone knew this. The Dragon Emperor had reorganized 17 species in the past 1,000 years, and no one even remembered their names anymore. The Colonial Council had been meeting every day since the message arrived, trying to decide what humanity could possibly offer to the most powerful being in the galaxy. They had no reality-altering technology, no planet-destroying weapons, no advanced computers that could think faster than light. "We could offer our medical knowledge," suggested Dr. Martinez, the colony's chief physician. "Our surgical techniques are quite advanced." "Advanced compared to what?" replied. "The hegemony can regrow entire bodies from a single cell. The energy beings do not even have bodies that can get sick." "What about our music?" asked Teacher Williams, who ran the colony's educational programs. "Human music is unique in the galaxy." "They create symphonies that can reshape reality itself," said with a sigh. "What could our simple songs possibly offer in comparison?" The debates went on for hours every day, but no one could think of anything that might impress a being who had rejected the greatest treasures of 1,000 different civilizations. Meanwhile, Myra continued to draw her pictures. She did not know about the Dragon Emperor or the tribute demand or the fear that gripped every adult in the colony. She knew only that she had nearly finished her latest masterpiece, a drawing of the most beautiful dragon she had ever imagined. This dragon was different from her others. It was larger and more detailed, with scales that seemed to shimmer even though they were drawn with simple crayons. But the most important difference was in the dragon's eyes. They held a sadness that Myra had never drawn before, as if this dragon had been alone for a very long time. At the bottom of the picture, she carefully wrote a message in her best handwriting. "Thank you for keeping everyone safe. I hope you like being a dragon because you are really good at it. Love, Myra." She had been working on this picture for weeks, and now it was almost done. She planned to give it to someone special, though she was not sure who yet. Maybe Doctor, who always looked so worried lately. Or maybe Teacher Williams, who had told the children stories about brave dragons fighting monsters in space. Myra folded the finished drawing carefully and put it in her pocket. Tomorrow was her birthday, and she wanted to have it ready to give away as a present to someone who needed it. She had no way of knowing that in just a few days, her simple drawing would catch the attention of the most powerful being in the galaxy. The station was the largest artificial structure in known space. It stretched across nearly 1,000,000 kilometers, with docking bays that could hold entire fleets and amphitheaters that seated representatives from 10,000 worlds. At its heart sat the great assembly hall, where the Dragon Emperor held court. Ambassador stood at the viewing window of the human transport ship, watching the massive station grow larger as they approached. Her hands shook slightly as she reviewed their presentation one final time. Behind her, 11 other humans prepared for what might be their species' final hour. And in the corner of the transport cabin, 8-year-old Myra sat quietly drawing a new picture. Had tried to leave Myra behind on New Sarajevo, but the child had insisted on coming. Dragons like children, Myra had said with the absolute certainty that only 8-year-old could possess. Grandmother's stories said so. Maybe I can help. The Colonial Council had debated this for hours. Bringing a child to face the Dragon Emperor seemed insane, but they were desperate, and desperate people sometimes listened to insane ideas. In the end, they decided that Myra's presence might make humanity seem more sympathetic. It was a thin hope, but it was the only hope they had. Now, as their ship joined the massive queue of vessels waiting to dock, wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The great assembly hall could hold 1 million beings, but today it seemed impossibly vast and empty. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in neat rows, each species keeping carefully to their designated sections. The air hummed with nervous energy as thousands of translators worked to convert alien languages into something resembling universal understanding. At the center of it all, the Dragon Emperor coiled around his neutron star throne. Myra gasped when she saw him. He was even more magnificent than her drawings had imagined. His scales shifted between deep blue and silver, catching the light from the station's artificial stars. His head was the size of a small building, with eyes like liquid gold that seemed to see everything at once. "He's beautiful," she whispered to, "but he looks sad." Did not reply. She was too busy trying not to collapse from the sheer weight of the Emperor's presence. The dragon's psychic aura pressed down on every mind in the hall like a physical force, making it hard to think clearly. The tribute presentations had already begun. Watched in growing despair as species after species approached the throne, with gifts that made humanity's offerings look pathetic by comparison. The architects went first. They were beings of living geometry who existed partially outside normal space-time. Their gift was a blueprint for remaking the fundamental structure of reality itself, a way to create universes that operated on entirely different physical laws. The Emperor studied their offering for less than 10 seconds before his mental voice boomed across the hall. "I have no need to change what already works perfectly." The architects retreated in confusion, their geometric forms flickering with distress. The Hive Queens came next. They ruled a collective consciousness of trillions of warrior drones spread across hundreds of worlds. They offered to merge their entire species with the Emperor's will, making him the supreme consciousness of the greatest army ever assembled. The Emperor's scales shifted to deep red. "I do not need servants who cannot think for themselves." One by one, the greatest civilizations in the galaxy presented their treasures. The energy beings offered to power his empire for 10,000 years. The sang, a new song that could create stars from nothing. The quantum dancers performed a ritual that could stop time itself. Every gift was rejected, with the same contemptuous dismissal. As the hours passed, noticed something disturbing. The Emperor was not just rejecting the gifts, he was becoming angrier with each presentation. His scales grew darker, shifting from red to deep purple to black. The temperature in the hall began to drop as his mood darkened. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Approached the throne on unsteady legs, the rest of the human delegation following behind her. Myra walked beside her, clutching a folded piece of paper in her small hands. "Your Imperial Majesty," began, her voice echoing in the vast hall. "Humanity presents its tribute to your greatness. We offer our most advanced medical knowledge, surgical techniques that have saved thousands of lives, and research into longevity treatments that could extend life indefinitely. She gestured to the other humans, who began setting up their presentation. Dr. Martinez stepped forward to explain their most sophisticated medical equipment, while Teacher Williams prepared to demonstrate their educational methodologies. But before they could begin, Myra broke away from the group. "Myra, no," called out, but it was too late. The small girl ran across the vast floor of the assembly hall, her footsteps echoing like tiny bells in the silence. Security drones began to move toward her, but something made them stop. Perhaps it was the absolute fearlessness in her movement, or the way she held her paper like a precious treasure. She stopped just short of the neutron star throne, craning her neck to look up at the massive dragon. The Emperor's golden eyes focused on her, and was sure that this was the moment humanity would die. But Myra smiled and held up her drawing. "Excuse me, Mr. Dragon," she called out in her clear, bright voice. "I made this for you." The entire hall fell silent. Every species represented there possessed some form of telepathic ability, and they could all feel the same thing radiating from the child's mind: pure, uncalculated sincerity. No fear, no hidden agenda, no desperate attempt to gain advantage. Just a little girl who wanted to give a gift to someone she thought might be lonely. Myra unfolded her drawing and held it up for the Emperor to see. It showed a magnificent dragon with kind golden eyes, spread wings protecting a group of tiny human figures below. The dragon in the picture was smiling, and somehow Myra had captured a sense of gentle strength in its expression. "I drew you as a good dragon," she explained, completely unaware that she was addressing the most feared being in the galaxy. "Grandmother told me stories about dragons who protected people. She said the best dragons were the ones who used their strength to help others instead of to hurt them." She paused, looking directly into the Emperor's massive eyes. "Thank you for keeping everyone safe," she said simply. "I hope you like being a dragon because you're really good at it." For the first time in over 300 years, the great assembly hall was completely silent. Every being present held their breath, waiting to see how the Dragon Emperor would respond to this impossible, innocent gift. Emperor stared down at the small human child, his massive form completely motionless. For the first time in over 800 years, his scales began to shift through colors that no living being had ever seen: soft golds and gentle greens, patterns of light that spoke of wonder rather than anger or boredom. Through his telepathic abilities, he could read every thought in Myra's mind. What he found there shook him to his very core. There was no fear in this child, despite standing before a being who could destroy entire star systems with a thought. There was no calculation, no hidden agenda, no desperate attempt to save her species through manipulation. Instead, her mind radiated something the Emperor had not encountered in 3,000 years of existence: pure gratitude. She was genuinely thankful for what she believed he represented. In her thoughts, he saw images from her grandmother's stories: dragons who rescued villages from floods, who shared their fire to keep families warm through harsh winters, who flew across vast distances to deliver medicine to the sick. This child saw him not as a terrifying conqueror, but as a protector. She had drawn him not with fangs bared and claws extended, but with gentle eyes and wings spread wide to shelter those below. And she had given him this gift, expecting nothing in return. The Emperor's massive claw, each talon longer than most starships, reached down with impossible gentleness to take the folded paper from Myra's small hands. The contrast was almost absurd, this tiny human offering a crayon drawing to a cosmic entity who commanded 3 galaxy clusters. But as his claw touched the simple paper, felt something he had not experienced since his youth, when he was barely larger than a mountain instead of larger than a city. He felt touched. The drawing itself was objectively crude. The crayons had been applied unevenly, and the proportions were all wrong. Any of 1,000 alien species could have created art that was technically superior in every way, but none of them had ever created anything with such perfect emotional honesty. In this simple picture, Myra had drawn what she hoped he could be, not what she feared he was. The Emperor's mental voice when it came was softer than it had been in centuries. "Child, what is gratitude?" Myra tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness that children bring to important matters. Grandmother said gratitude is when you're happy someone exists, even if they don't do anything special for you. Like being happy there are stars in the sky, even though they're too far away to touch. She paused, then added, "I'm grateful you exist because the universe is more interesting with dragons in it, and because knowing you're watching makes people feel safer, even if they've never met you." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, processing this explanation. In 3 of existence, he had received tribute from species that could manipulate dark matter, beings who existed as pure consciousness, civilizations that had transcended physical reality entirely. Every single offering had been designed to gain something: protection, favorable trade agreements, territorial concessions, or simply the assurance that he would not destroy them. But this child had given him something infinitely more precious than any of those cosmic treasures. She had given him the gift of being seen as worthy of gratitude simply for existing. His scales shifted again, cycling through colors that gradually grew brighter and warmer. The massive hall began to warm as his mood changed, and beings who had been holding their breath finally dared to breathe again. But the Emperor was not done exploring this new feeling. "You have lost much, little one," he said, reading the deeper layers of her thoughts. "Your parents, your grandmother, your home world, yet you speak of gratitude. How is this possible?" Myra's eyes grew sad for a moment, but her voice remained steady. "Grandmother taught me that being angry about what you've lost just makes you forget about what you still have. I lost my parents, but I still have my friends at the orphanage. I lost Earth, but I have New Sarajevo now. And I have my drawings and stories, and the hope that tomorrow might be even better than today." She looked up at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her 8 years. "Besides," she added, "being grateful for good things makes them feel more real, and being grateful for people makes them know they matter." The Emperor's laughter, when it came, was like the sound of creation itself, powerful enough to register on seismic equipment throughout the station, but somehow warm and joyful rather than terrifying. For the first time in 2,000 years, laughed with genuine pleasure. "In 3, he said, his mental voice carrying wonder instead of command, "this is the first gift I have received that was not poisoned by ambition or fear. You offer me the only thing you have, your honest appreciation, and you ask for nothing in return." He held up the drawing so that every being in the vast assembly hall could see it. The crude crayon lines and uneven coloring somehow managed to capture something that all the advanced art in the galaxy had missed: the idea that great power could be gentle, that strength could be protective rather than destructive. "I accept this tribute," the Emperor announced, his words shaking the foundations of galactic politics. "For the first time in 2,000 years, I accept a gift given freely and without calculation." The reaction throughout the hall was instantaneous. Thousands of alien species began talking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and telepathic noise. This was unprecedented. The Dragon Emperor had never accepted tribute from anyone, let alone from humanity, the youngest and weakest species in known space. But was not finished. "More than that," he continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, "I declare humanity to be under my personal protection. Any who would harm them will face my displeasure." He paused, his golden eyes still fixed on Myra's upturned face. "But most importantly, this child has reminded me of something I had forgotten. Power without purpose is meaningless. Strength without wisdom is merely destruction. I have spent too many years ruling through fear when I could have been ruling through inspiration." His scales brightened to brilliant gold, a color that no living being had ever seen from him before. "From this day forward, the Draconic Imperium will seek not merely to command, but to protect, not merely to conquer, but to nurture. We will become the guardians this child believes us to be." He looked down at Myra one more time, his massive form somehow managing to convey warmth despite its cosmic scale. "Thank you, small artist, for showing me what I had forgotten. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply helping someone remember who they want to be." 10 years had passed since the day a human child changed the course of galactic history with a simple drawing. The universe was a very different place now. Myra, now 18 years old, stood in her art studio aboard the flagship of the Imperial fleet. The room was filled with canvases, sculptures, and holographic displays showing her latest work. But in the place of honor, carefully preserved behind protective glass, hung her original crayon drawing of a gentle dragon protecting tiny humans. Emperor had kept that drawing with him ever since the day she gave it to him. It traveled wherever he went, displayed prominently in his throne room, council chambers, and private quarters. When diplomatic meetings grew tense, or when the weight of ruling 3 galaxy clusters seemed overwhelming, he would look at those uneven crayon lines and remember what it meant to be a protector rather than a conqueror. The changes had started small. Instead of ruling through fear and displays of overwhelming power, the emperor began to ask questions. What did various species need to thrive? How could the Imperium help solve problems rather than simply demand obedience? The first species to experience this new approach were the. Instead of dismissing their reality-shaping songs as worthless, the emperor asked them to use their abilities to repair war-torn worlds. They began composing symphonies that could heal poisoned atmospheres and restore dead ecosystems. For the first time in their history, their art had a purpose beyond beauty. It had meaning. The collective, those vast artificial minds, found themselves tasked with solving humanitarian crises across the galaxy. Their massive computational power, once used only for abstract research, now worked to distribute resources efficiently, predict natural disasters, and coordinate relief efforts on a scale never before imagined. Even the warrior species of the hegemony discovered new purpose. Instead of simply conquering and destroying, they became peacekeepers and protectors. Their planet-cracking weapons were retooled to break up dangerous asteroids or clear space debris. Their invincible armies became rescue forces for planets struck by natural disasters. The transformation was not instant or easy. Many species struggled to adapt to this new way of thinking. Some resisted, preferring the old system where power was the only currency that mattered. But gradually, as the benefits of cooperation became clear, even the most stubborn civilizations began to change. And at the center of it all was Myra, who had become something unprecedented in galactic history, the Dragon Emperor's cultural ambassador. Her job was unlike any diplomatic position ever created. She did not negotiate trade agreements or territorial boundaries. Instead, she traveled throughout the Imperium, creating art that reminded people, both human and alien, of what was worth protecting in the universe. Her paintings now hung in government buildings on 1,000 worlds. Her sculptures graced public spaces where different species gathered to share knowledge and culture. But most importantly, her letters to the emperor helped him remember why he had chosen to change his approach to ruling. Every month, Myra wrote him a simple message, usually accompanied by a new drawing. The letters talked about the people she had met, the beautiful things she had seen, and the small acts of kindness that made the universe brighter. They reminded him that behind every political decision were real individuals with hopes, fears, and dreams. The emperor had started writing back, something he had never done with any other being in his 3 of existence. His responses were carefully preserved in the imperial archives, and historians already predicted they would be studied for thousands of years as examples of wisdom and compassion from the most powerful ruler in galactic history. But today, Myra was not thinking about history or politics. She was putting the finishing touches on her latest masterpiece, a massive painting that showed representatives from every known species working together to build something beautiful. At the center of the composition, barely visible unless you looked carefully, was a small human child handing a drawing to a gentle dragon. "It's almost finished," she said to the empty studio, speaking to the recording device that would carry her words to the Emperor. "I call it What We Built Together. It's going to be displayed in the new Cultural Exchange Center on station." She paused, cleaning paint from her brush, then continued with the warm familiarity of someone speaking to an old friend. "You know what I realized while I was painting this? 10 years ago, when I gave you that first drawing, I thought I was just thanking you for being strong enough to protect everyone. But now I understand that the real gift was not my gratitude, it was your willingness to accept it." She stepped back to examine her work, satisfied with what she saw. "Grandmother used to say that gratitude is a conversation between hearts. One person offers appreciation, but it only becomes real when the other person accepts it as genuine. When you accepted my drawing, you were accepting the idea that you could be the protector I believed you were. And then you became that protector, not just for humans, but for everyone." On the far side of the galaxy, in the great throne room that had once been a place of fear and submission, Emperor listened to Myra's words while gazing at her original drawing. His scales glowed with the warm gold that had become his usual color, a dramatic change from the angry reds and bored blues of his past. Around him, the throne room had been transformed as well. Where once there had been only cold stone and stark metal, now there were growing things gardens that different species had contributed, art from 100 different worlds, and soft places where visitors could sit comfortably instead of cowering in terror. The neutron star throne remained, but it no longer seemed like a symbol of crushing power. Instead, it had become the center of something warmer, a place where the strong chose to use their strength in service of those who needed protection. As Myra's message continued, the Emperor found himself smiling, an expression that would have been impossible for him just 10 years ago. "I've been thinking about what I want to do next," Myra was saying. "The Cultural Exchange Center is almost ready, and they want me to run their new program for young artists from different species. I think I'd like that. Teaching children to see beauty in each other's differences seems like important work." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the same simple sincerity it had held when she was 8 years old. "Thank you for letting a small human child teach you something new. Thank you for choosing to be the dragon my grandmother told me about in her stories. And thank you for showing the whole galaxy that the greatest power is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know what is worth protecting." The message ended, and the Emperor sat quietly in his transformed throne room, surrounded by the beauty that had grown from one child's act of gratitude. In her studio, Myra carefully placed her painting on an easel where the light would catch it perfectly. Tomorrow, she would begin teaching the first interspecies art class in galactic history. Her students would include young who wanted to learn about human painting techniques, collective drones curious about non-digital creativity, and human children eager to understand alien forms of artistic expression. But tonight, she simply sat in her chair and drew one more small picture: a dragon and a little girl sitting together under a tree, sharing stories and laughing about the wonderful strangeness of the universe. Some gifts, she had learned, keep on giving long after they are first offered. The best gifts change not just the one who receives them, but everyone who witnesses what grows from a moment of simple, honest connection between hearts.